Listener discretion is advised. This episode features the true account of a serial killer. For those of you who may be triggered by disturbing topics, please skip this episode. There's a small town in South Carolina where southern charm and rural life paint a quiet picture. But just beneath that surface lived one of the most sadistic serial killers in American history. An unassuming man of short stature, big lies, and a staggering body count. This is the story of Donald Henry Gaskins. I'm your host, Dan David. Welcome to City of Nightmares. Sumter, South Carolina is one of those places where everything moves just a little slower. There are mom and pop diners on nearly every corner, churches with white steeples punctuating the horizon, and rows of historic homes from a bygone era. It's not the kind of place where you'd expect to find a monster hiding in plain sight. Located near the geographic center of the state, Sumter is a community that has its roots in the 18th century, when it was known as the town of Sumterville. Named after Revolutionary War hero General Thomas Sumter, it became a hub for agriculture and commerce. During the Civil War, it played a role in the Confederacy's supply lines, and like many southern towns, it bears the scars of history in both its architecture and its racial past. Through the 20th century, Sumter grew steadily, thanks in part to Shaw Air Force Base, one of the oldest and most active installations in the U.S. military. It brought jobs, infrastructure, and a mix of people from all over the country. But despite its military prestige, Sumter has long retained its small-town feel, the kind of place where everyone knows each other, or thinks they do. But in the 1960s and 70s, a predator stalked the highways and backroads of South Carolina. His crime stretched far beyond the city limits. He hunted like a phantom, and he boasted that no one could stop him. His name was Donald Henry Gaskins. Donald Henry Gaskins was born on March 13th, 1933, in rural Florence County, just northeast of Sumter. His childhood was marked by neglect, abuse, and instability. He didn't even know his real name until he was about 13 years old. His mother, a woman who reportedly worked as a sex worker at times, gave him little attention and less love. He was small for his age, and that made him a target. The nickname Pee-wee stuck early, and cruelly. He hated it. He would later claim that people looked down on him his whole life, and that every murder he committed helped him feel like he was getting even. At age 11, he was arrested for the first time for assaulting a young girl with an axe. By 13, he was sentenced to a reform school where he said he was repeatedly raped and beaten by older boys. That experience, he would later say, taught him that the only way to survive was to dominate. He escaped from reform school several times, and during those breaks, he began committing burglaries and car thefts, but the violent urges were already present. When he was finally released, he didn't rehabilitate, he evolved. Gaskins cycled in and out of jail through his teens and 20s. He was convicted of assault, attempted murder, and later, sexual violence. But it wasn't until the late 1960s that he started killing. He claimed his first murder took place in 1969, a hitchhiker he picked up on a back road. According to him, she laughed at him. That laugh, he said, brought back everything. He raped, tortured, and killed her. And then, he said, he found his release. In his autobiography, Final Truth, Gaskins explained,
"To me, life didn't mean nothing, especially other people's. I seen how easy it was to kill somebody, and after the first time, it just come natural. I had my own way of doing things, and once I started, I couldn't stop. People say I was crazy, but I wasn't. Just mean and full of hate."
He called these his coastal kills. They were random, opportunistic, and deeply sadistic. Gaskins said he prowled the highways of the southeastern U.S., especially between the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida, looking for runaways or loners. Most were women. He would charm them just long enough to get them alone, then drug, rape, and kill them in isolated areas. In total, he claimed to have murdered between 80 and 110 people. Most of those victims were never found, but not all of Gaskins' murders were random. He made a clear distinction between his coastal kills and what he called personal kills. These were people he knew, friends, neighbors, and acquaintances. People who had wronged him in some way. Sometimes they owed him money. Sometimes they talked too much. One of the victims was even his own niece, who he murdered after she confided in him that she was pregnant. He buried her body in his backyard. Authorities eventually uncovered a makeshift graveyard behind Gaskins' trailer in Prospect, South Carolina. The remains of several victims were exhumed, including Kim Gelkins, Diane Bellamy, and Doreen Hope, all local girls who had gone missing. Investigators were horrified. Many of the remains showed signs of extreme torture. It wasn't just murder. It was ritualistic cruelty. In 1975, Gaskins was convicted of 8 murders and sentenced to life in prison. At the time, the death penalty had been temporarily suspended by the U.S. Supreme Court. So he went to prison. But his reign of terror didn't stop there. Inside Central Correctional Institution in Columbia, Gaskins managed to gain influence over other inmates. Despite his size, he had a kind of power, charisma, manipulation, intimidation. He became a hitman for hire on the inside. In 1982, he was paid by another inmate's family to silence a man named Rudolph Tyner, a fellow death row inmate who had killed a grocery store owner and his wife during a robbery. Gaskins tried to poison Tyner, but when that failed, he got creative. Using connections both inside and outside the prison, he obtained C4 explosives and convinced Tyner that he was giving him a 2-way intercom radio so they could talk between cells. Gaskins wired the device and detonated it from his own cell, killing Tyner instantly. Solicitor James Anders, the lead prosecutor in the case, told the court,
"Donald Gaskins is not just a murderer. He's a man who killed because he wanted to, because it made him feel powerful. He didn't just take lives, he planned it, enjoyed it, and even bragged about it with a smile. If there's ever been a person deserving of the death penalty, it's him."
This time, the court agreed. Gaskins was sentenced to death, and in 1991, he was executed in the electric chair. At the time of his execution, he was 58 years old. He had been in and out of prisons for over 4 decades and claimed more victims than any other killer in South Carolina history. His confessions were published in Final Truth, a book written in collaboration with journalist Wilton Earl. The book was controversial, not just for its content, but for the question of truth. Many believe Gaskins exaggerated his body count to inflate his own legend. But even if half of what he said was true, it still makes him one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. He died without remorse, In fact, his final interviews revealed a man who never once expressed guilt. He told Earl he believed he was equal to God because he could take life and instill fear. He wasn't charming. He wasn't clever. He was cruel. And for years he got away with it, right in the heart of the South. Thank you for joining me for this chilling look into the life of Donald Henry Gaskins. Be sure to follow the show so you don't miss our next episode, because we're heading to Texas. Tucked inside Dallas lies a building with a legacy of power, politics, and whispered hauntings. Join me next time as we investigate Old Parkland Hospital. Until then, this is your host, Dan David, reminding you to stay safe out there. I'll be seeing you in the next episode.
Nope.